Afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dixon Lai. I'm from Lottery District 330 Action Group, Mental Health Initiative. I would like to invite Dr. Bindi Rajasingram to have the open welcome speech.
I want to be with God. I'm a total failure. I've no job, no roof above my head. This person is desperate. Should this person have tried to commit suicide and failed, does that make this person a criminal? Such people are desperate for help. They are not criminals. Good afternoon and welcome to this friendly dialogue on a burning subject. My name is Bindi. If any one of you would like to be famous today and have the camera focused on you, please do not activate the silent mode on your phone. How are you today? A most seemingly common question. But recently, a police officer in San Francisco was shaken to the core when he read this note. And the note said, "I'm leaving this world because nobody cares. And I'm walking to the bridge to jump. And if anyone stops me on the way and asks how I am doing, I'm going to turn around and come home." Sadly, no one did. We care. All of you here today too care. Everyone online also shows that they care. So let's talk about a subject that is not going to disappear, but needs the importance that it so deserves because it concerns lives. The program today is going to be crisp and engaging. Time is precious to everyone in this room, so let's get this dialogue going. At the onset, allow me to extend a very warm welcome to everyone in this room, and I would like to recognize the presence of our members of parliament here. YB Tuan M. Kulasegran, Member of Parliament for Ipoh Barat. YB Dr. Xavier Jayakumar, Member of Parliament for Kuala Langat. YB Tuan Ahmad Fahmi, Member of Parliament for Lembah Pantai. He had to leave for urgent reasons. He was with us for the past 1 hour. And YB Kelvin Yee, Member of Parliament for Kuching, who is with us online. Thank you to the members of the press, members of the Rotary District Action Group for Mental Health Initiatives, guests, and everyone tuned in online. Now, mental health in Malaysia has seen a recent revival in awareness, outreach engagements, efficacy in communications, diversity in availability of programs, and advocacy in fostering resilience. The engagement of the Ministry of Health is amazing, and the programs and plans for a National Center for Excellence for Mental Health is so commendable. Today's event is organized by the National Coalition for Mental Wellbeing, and amongst our 6 areas of focus, one area is decriminalizing attempted suicides. Our committee handling this issue is a small but powerful committee, very dedicated, very passionate, and all we do is harness and channel that energy to where it matters most. In Malaysia, a suicide attempt is currently seen as a crime that is punishable by a term of imprisonment or fine or both as provided for by Section 309 of the Malaysian Penal Code. Instead of punishment, the focus should be to facilitate access to appropriate care in a professional and sensitive manner. According to World Health Organization, majority of countries have decriminalized attempted suicide. Hong Kong decriminalized attempted suicide in 1967 and implemented effective suicide prevention strategies. India, which shares a similar penal code to Malaysia, decriminalized attempted suicide in 2014. In 2019, Singapore decriminalized attempted suicide on the basis that it is a public health and social issue, not a criminal one. In Malaysia, criminalizing and punishing one for attempted suicide is intended as a deterrent effect to others who might be contemplating suicidal behavior. Yet, there is no data that proves the efficacy of such a deterrent. In fact, at the WHO Health Assembly in 2019, all health ministers agreed that decriminalizing attempted suicides was an effective way to reduce deaths by suicide when they approved the World Health Organization's Mental Health Action Plan for 2021 to 2030. And the conversation in Malaysia has been going on for many years. We at Grassroots can only highlight this issue. We depend on our lawmakers and parliamentarians to ensure this issue is brought to Parliament and a law passed. Our very exuberant Minister of Health, YB Khairi, released a statement yesterday, and it's really refreshing to note that the issue is current with the ministry. But now there is a sense of urgency as lives matter. Now allow me to introduce the panel here today. The chairman and moderator is Dr. Venugopal, who is a practicing consultant cardiothoracic surgeon with Pantai Hospital. He also served as the immediate past president of the Medical Legal Society and a member of the Decriminalization Focus Group of the National Coalition for Mental Wellbeing. We also have Dato Sri M. Ramachelvam, who is the chairperson of the Law Reform and Special Areas Committee of the Bar Council. He also serves as a co-chairperson of the Migrants, Refugees and Immigration Affairs Committee and the Task Force on the Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission. He was the chairperson of the Institutional and Law Reform Committee of the Bar Council of Malaysia, which submitted proposals on institutional and law reforms to the Government of Malaysia in 2018. Dato Rama is also a member of the Decriminalization Focus Group of the NCMW. We have Ms. Shanti Abraham, a practicing lawyer for over 25 years and current president of the Medical Legal Society of Malaysia. She's also the current co-chair of the proposed Mental Capacity Act for Malaysia under the Malaysian Bar Council. She's also a member of the Decriminalization Focus Group of NCMW. We also have the distinguished presence of Dr. Salina binti Abdul Aziz, the former head of Psychiatry Services with the Ministry of Health, Malaysia, and currently a director with the Mental Health Foundation. Dr. Salina has spent all her working life in this subject of mental health and just retired from government service after an illustrious career. Next, we have Ms. Sangeet Kaur, Please don't mistake her for a Bollywood actress, though she looks like one, and you often see her in the media. Ms. Sangeet is a lawyer by profession, and here today representing the Bar Council and also a member of the committee in NCMW. And our sixth member is Mr. Victor Tan, Deputy Chair of Befrienders, Kuala Lumpur. And I must say here the work that Befrienders do, and they have been doing it for the past many years, has been enormous, and they are the lifeline for many people in distress. Ladies and gentlemen, I pass the proceedings to the chairman of the panel, Dato Dr. Venugopal. Over to you, Dato. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato Bindi. YB Kula, YB Xavier Jayakumar, fellow members of the panel, members of NCMW, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. A total of 1,142 Malaysians took their own lives in the year 2021. A dramatic but possibly avoidable 81% increase from the 631 lives lost in the year 2020. All over the world, one suicide takes place every 40 seconds. In all honesty, I think this is the real pandemic of our times. COVID, with its relentless attacks on employment status, financial security, economic uncertainty, social isolation, and mental insecurities, has without doubt contributed to the scary statistics of suicides in Malaysia. Now, attempting to take one's own life has to be a desperate cry for help from someone who has lost all ability to cope. It is a mental health and well-being issue, not an issue to be dealt with by the criminal justice system. Section 309 of the Penal Code allows authorities to fine or jail up to 1 year or both survivors of attempted suicide. In one blink of an eye, a cry for help becomes an avenue for punishment. Section 309 may have been introduced with all good intentions as a deterrent to suicide, but the evidence does not show that it has fulfilled that role. Malaysia, along with Brunei and Myanmar, are the only countries in the ASEAN where attempted suicide is illegal. Section 309 delays the rights of suicide survivors to prompt medical attention. It also increases the apprehension of those with mental health issues to seek early assistance and care. It is also very important to note that there is absolutely no evidence to show that repealing Section 309 will lead to an increase in attempted suicides. In a kind, caring, and compassionate society, it is only right that those with mental health issues are given every opportunity and access to prompt medical care. Like hypertension, like diabetes, like cancer, mental health issues can be treated and treated effectively. As Malaysia is on the verge of doing away with mandatory death penalty for certain crimes, we personally believe that repealing Section 309 of the Penal Code for what is certainly not a crime will only be a feather in the cap for a government that has the Rakyat at its very core. Now, people have always asked me, at least over the last 3 years, what is a heart surgeon doing asking for mental health law to be put into place and to repeal Section 309? Without any apology, I would like to say that heart surgeons are known for their intellect, for their persuasion, for their planning, for their meticulousness, for their kindness, for their caring, for the compassion, for the understanding, and for the empathy. And I think these are all the very qualities that one needs to put an end and have some closure to this effort of repealing Section 309 that has certainly been going on with well-intended organizations and individuals over many years. There are some things that heart surgeons cannot do, and for that we need parliamentarians. And I think for those who are here in person and for those who have joined us online, it is my humble request that you further this cause in whatever capacity that you may be able to, and put the smiles back on some of these faces that really need them. So with that, I will now hand over the floor to various members of our panel for the specifics on Section 309, why it should be repealed, what are the advantages, are there any disadvantages, what are the potential flaws, what are the potential objections, and such other issues. And to set the ball rolling, it is my pleasure to invite my good friend and a very senior, accomplished lawyer, Dato Sri Rama, who is also a member of the Law Reform Committee for the Bar Council. Dato Rama, it's yours.
Thank you, Dato Venu. YB Kula, YB Xavier, YB Kevin Yi, past District Governor Bindi, past District Governor Siti, past President Dixon Lai, distinguished guests, my fellow panelists, a very good afternoon. The topic that I was asked to speak would just take me 30 seconds. But I have been given 5 minutes, so I'll try to at least take a few minutes to talk on that topic about decriminalization. The Penal Code, as all of you know, is a colonial legislation that was enacted in the 1930s. So we have the similar penal code throughout the Commonwealth. And throughout the Commonwealth, from India to Singapore to Kenya to South Africa, the law says that the law on attempted suicide is in Section 309. Section 309 provides for, or rather criminalizes, the attempt to commit suicide as a crime. The punishment is a year or fine or both. So that is what we are dealing with. Most jurisdictions have dealt with Section 309 separately from the other sections pertaining to suicide. The sections are Section 305, the offense of abetment of suicide of child or insane person. For that attempt, or rather the abetment, the punishment is death or imprisonment of 20 years. The third section on suicide is Section 306, the offense of abetment of suicide, where a term of imprisonment of 10 years is imposed. The proposal and the legal reforms that has taken place throughout the world in most jurisdictions has been as with regards to Section 309. They have decriminalized 309. They have taken out 309 from the penal code. Sections 305 and 306 largely has not been touched, even in India or Singapore or the African jurisdictions. To talk about Section 305 and 306, we go to another area of law, the euthanasia, the right to make a decision to die, assisted suicide, and so on and so forth. We are not going there. We are just looking at the primary offense of 309. So as I said, it's a very simple piece of legislation. The legislators will agree, YB Kula is a lawyer himself, that all that needs to be done, as was done in Singapore, is a one-liner, that Section 309 be repealed. And then the penal code will read, when you look at the penal code after that repeal is done, this section has been repealed. If you now download the Singapore Penal Code, Section 309, Section 309 still is there, but the accompanying part says this has been repealed by Act number whatever. That's all that needs to be done. There's no rocket science. There's no paper that needs to be, where they have to take a position and come out with new laws. Drafting a new law takes time. Debating the law takes time. But repealing a section of the law can be done at the blink of an eye. And as I have said, this is the lowest of the lowest hanging fruits for the government to do. This is a no-brainer, really, because throughout the Commonwealth, throughout the world, even many of the Islamic nations in the world, the largest Islamic nation in our region or the world, Indonesia has decriminalized, Turkey has decriminalized, Qatar has just decriminalized a couple of years ago. So the trend is to decriminalize. In the entire world, Malaysia is one of those 25 countries and regions that have not decriminalized. As Dato Venu has pointed out, we are in the strange company of Myanmar and Brunei in the region not decriminalizing. There is, Dato Bindi and Dato Venu have already highlighted to you, decriminalization does not lead to an increase in suicides. This has been proven by studies. In some countries, there's been a slight increase, for instance, in Ireland and Canada, and that is attributed to more accurate reporting. Because right now, if there's an attempted suicide, the family or the medical professionals will not report it or try to avoid reporting the suicide, because the victim would potentially face a criminal charge. So that is where we are. I am coming to my 5 minutes, am I? So what I want to say is this. The attempts in our country started in 2012 when the Law Reform Committee proposed it be decriminalized. Further on, it went on in 2019 when the new government took over. Dato' Wan Azizah had said that they would, the then Deputy Prime Minister had said they would look at it. In fact, V.K. Liu, the Minister for Law, said this, and I would like to quote. These people who attempted to end their life should not be punished, but rather given medical help, because they are probably going through tremendous pressure in their life. That is what the Honorable late Minister said. Subsequently, on 2nd December 2020, the government's then Deputy Prime Minister said that they are studying the law as it has been applied in various jurisdictions, post-decriminalization, UK, Singapore, India, New Zealand, and so on. That study is from 2020, we've passed 2021, we are into 2022, And the minister again repeats the same thing. Study is being done, or rather done, there is some objection. You see, the medical health professionals are all in agreement that suicide has to be decriminalized. The legal community also agrees that suicide has to be decriminalized. That is the position of the Bar Council as well. We do not know, and I think the science is there, right? That Section 309 does not prevent suicide. In fact, Section 309, what it does is it prevents persons who need help from obtaining the relevant help. So my call, or rather NCMW's call, is we should not be waiting for November or December or January. This October, they can pass the law and decriminalize it immediately. We have been postponing and postponing and postponing a law that should have been done yesterday, right? So Parliament is in session, will be in session. We hope that in this session, they will take the necessary steps. There is nothing much to be done except to pass a bill to, repeal Section 309. With that, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dato Rama. Repealing Section 309 is one aspect of the law. But from what I gather from the few reports that I read about KJ and the event yesterday and his comments, I think the stumbling block seems to be from the AGC and KDN. I'm sure there are valid reasons. I'm sure the PDRM and the other first responders have concerns. But I think these are concerns that can be easily sorted out over a negotiating table. And honestly, if you had come to see me as a heart surgeon with a problem that I couldn't solve over 20, 25 years, I don't think I would be worth my job in any respect. I find it incredibly unusual that something as simple as this, with all the evidence in its favor, has taken 25 years and a whole lot of dedicated individuals to try and achieve. It beats me. But if we are really talking about a keluarga Malaysia wanting to help each other, I think this is the time to show that we are indeed a keluarga and not just a hypocritical version of it. So the next person that I would like to call onto the stage is my other dear friend, they're all dear friends, Ms. Shanti Abraham, who is a leading lawyer, a leading arbitrator, a leading mediator in her own right, and is also a member of this task force. She has been extremely helpful to all of us for the last 2.5 years. And she will talk to us about the medical obligations that doctors have when they treat patients with mental health issues. Shanti?
Thank you, Dr. Venu. A very good afternoon, YB, Dato Bindi, and organizers. Thank you very much for putting together this very important conversation. I believe Dato Rama has really encapsulated what and why we are here. But as Dato Venu put it, it's important to know what people on the ground have to grapple with as well. Now, the call is for the repeal of 309 of the Penal Code and the abolishment of the mindset that attempting suicide is a crime. The moment we do that, we'll be signaling that we are a maturing society that recognizes that an attempted suicide is a call for help and not a crime. Now, In my capacity as the president of the Medical Legal Society, I've had the privilege of speaking to doctors on the ground to ask them how they deal with, they are the frontliners after all, how they deal with people who may be attempting suicide. And this is the fact. There is no express protocol for doctors dealing with patients who have signaled that they've attempted suicide or who may have been have come in because they've attempted suicide, apart from the duty to refer them to a psychiatrist for further treatment and care. Because of the obligations of confidentiality, a doctor may not be obliged to share that a person has attempted suicide unless there is an imminent danger to the person himself or people around them. It puts doctors in a very difficult position as long as attempted suicide remains a crime, because the messaging is that this cry for help has in fact been sanctioned by society. Now, I want to make a distinction between mental health issues and suicide ideation, because suicide ideation is not necessarily a mental health issue. You have patients who are going through, who have had debilitating strokes, cancer. They're not mentally unwell, but they may have suicide ideation. They may even make attempted suicide attempts. But to criminalize it would be very myopic of us as a society, rather than to hear the call for help and make provisions for them to have the support that they need, and to assist the doctors who are in the front line to be able to help these people who are desperately in need of mental health support as well as psychological support. Now, at the end of the day, if we were to look forward to a time when the 309 has been repealed, we can look towards proper thought leadership for the doctors as well as those who will be facing people who are attempting suicide, people like our colleagues from Befrienders as well as other people, teachers and the police, to perhaps think of methods of how to support people who are attempting suicide or considering an attempt of suicide. I have a vision that one day we may have a SWAT team, which is on the basis of not only that lives matter, as Dato' Bindi pointed out, but that your life matters. And therefore, instead of being carted off to the police station and behind bars, you will have an SOP or a support structure that activates the psychologist or the psychiatrist or the medical help that such patients need. Now, at this current time, in order to determine whether someone has mental health issues, requires a psychiatric evaluation. But I understand that there might be a shortage of psychiatrists in this country, and we'll be hearing from Dr. Salina on this issue. We need to train more frontliners to be able to identify healthcare issues. And that would include people from the police force, as well as teachers, as well as the man on the street, to be able to help our rakyat who may be in need. Now, I was told by my colleagues that there is something called the DAS screening form, which is for depression, anxiety, and stress scales. Now, this is something that we can perhaps, as part of our maturing as a society, recognizing mental health care needs, to get people to understand how to use this self-assessment and reach out for help, even if they have had suicide ideation. So what is Medical Legal Society of Malaysia's call for action? We call for the abolishment of the mindset that an attempted suicide is a crime. We call for the repeal of Section 309 of the Penal Code, and we also call for further development in the support of our community and society, and in one day having a much needed Mental Capacity Act as well, which is currently missing in our legislation. As Dato' Rama very poetically put it, repealing Section 309 is a very straightforward affair, and we hope our YB here, as well as your colleagues, are able to put that in place, and let us get into the hard work of looking at other legislative reforms that require a lot more of our time and effort. And on that note, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Shanti. The passion did shine through. And, you know, it's, to be fair, both the Ministry of Health and the AG's chambers have been engaged in discussions for 20 years, 25 years, maybe even longer on this one topic of repealing Section 309. And funnily, when I took over this chair about 2.5 years ago, and we wanted something in writing, we were looking for the previous minutes or previous meetings and all that, and nothing was properly documented. So minutes are missing, so many things are not documented properly, and it is indeed a bit disappointing. But what is encouraging is that people have been talking to each other for far too long maybe. And to let us in on the current status of where the discussions are and what exactly are the stumbling blocks, if any, is Dr. Salina binti Abdulaziz, who just 2 weeks ago retired as the head of psychiatry services for the country. And we pulled her out of retirement to come and give us this afternoon 5-minute chat. Dr. Salina?
Oh, thank you very much, Professor. Dr. Rahman. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, you're putting me in a bit of a spot, but being a medical officer for the last 35 years and as a psychiatrist for the last 25 years, yes, you can't hear me, okay. The psychiatric fraternity, the mental health fraternity has been talking about repelling the Section 309. It's been going on for so long. It is so frustrating for us who works in the mental health profession to find our patient being sent to the police station instead of to the hospital. Okay? Someone who is depressed, who is feeling hopeless, who is feeling useless, and who does not see their future, who has a lot of pain, and being sent to the police station in the lockup and asked to pay a fine, and some of them are not even given access to mental health professional help. So I think most of our patients, okay, to them, it is not a desire to die actually. It is a cry for help. When I see a lot of patients who try to attempt suicide, it is a cry for help. They do not want to die. They want a better life so that they can go on. So how can we give this better life? When you drag them to the police station, you are not giving them a better life. In fact, you're giving them more hopelessness, more feeling of uselessness, okay, instead of helping them. We have come up with the Mental Health Act with Section 9 and, Section 9, Section 10, where allowing voluntary treatment and also involuntary treatment for those with mental health issues. Unfortunately, this is not being, used. I'm not a lawyer, I might be using the wrong word. Okay, it's not being used, okay? Only those who are being caught on the street is being used. So I hope that this act can be sort of a priority as compared to 309. That means I want all who are attempting suicide to get assessment, to get help from the psychiatric or mental health professional before even they go to the police station. They need help, they need care, okay? Rather than they need to be in the police station. So for the last few years that I've been in the service, I find there have been a lot of change, okay, with education and promotion through that we have done in the community, where now a lot more people are coming voluntarily for treatment in our facility. We have 65 hospitals, state hospital, major hospital, minor hospital throughout the country that have psychiatric services and psychiatrists. So that means it is quite well covered. We have about 325 psychiatrists throughout Malaysia in the government service. Okay? And we have what we call a community center, Mentari, about 15 of them in most countries. And this is in the community. It's not in the hospital, Mentari. It's in the community. And it is less stigmatizing. You can walk in, get help there. Okay? So I hope with the repeal of the Section 309, a lot more people can come forward, not be afraid of being persecuted, okay, not being afraid. There has been one incident in my whole life where a patient walked out of psychiatric ward and the policeman was waiting there to handcuff him and send him to jail for attempting suicide. But after that, we had some engagement, it stopped. So it was a very sad thing, but I hope this sort of thing does not happen again. This has been going on for the last 10 years. And the saddest thing is that every time an incident happens, it gets a lot of hoo-ha, just like recently, a lot of hoo-ha, then it dies down. I hope it doesn't die down now. Something is being done to ensure that our community are not reprimanded for attempting suicide. Just an observation on our side. We find that lately, a lot of the youngsters, the teenagers, okay, the youngsters are now attempting suicide. We hypothesize that for the last few years, these people got no one to talk to, and their cry of the way they cry for help now is by cutting their wrists. We see quite a lot now, actually. A lot of students, a lot of college students doing this. So you imagine if a college student attempted suicide and end up paying a fine or goes to jail, what happened to their future? No, we don't want this to happen because a lot of youngsters are doing this now. I hope we can repeal this Section 309, and hopefully it will happen this year. I hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Salina. I have a 19-year-old boy, and like many other 19-year-old boys, is very much into video games. And the video games that come out these days are brutal. They are very violent. And the other day, I actually saw him playing a game when I was just sitting down next to him. It was a game where they were all shooting each other. So somebody had got shot, was on the ground, and he, the video gamer, as he is walking past that guy who was already shot, injured on the ground, shoots him again, just to make sure he's dead. Now this is what Section 309 does to somebody, in my opinion. You are kicking somebody who is already almost dead. And I think that is not what humanity is all about. Maybe we need to come out with new video games, I don't know. But I think Section 309, and like what Dato Rama has very eloquently highlighted, is I don't think that difficult a procedure to do, to repeal 309. Now, in between all this gloom and doom, a little bit of Bollywood cheer will do us a lot of good. So, I do sing a lot of Bollywood songs, Sangeet, by the way, and a duet one evening is not a bad option, all right? So, to tell us more about what actually happens when 309 comes into play, and what happens to these survivors of attempted suicide when they are actually handled by the first responders, who may be police, who may be bomba, who may be other first responders. It's my pleasure to invite Ms. Sangeet Cordio, and she will just highlight some of those
Thank
things.
you, Dato. Good afternoon to everyone. YBs, the organizers, thank you for having this very timely call. I think the issue now is not so much the need for repeal. I think most of us are on the same page relating to that. we are now facing an issue of urgency. We have been talking about this for years. Before I answer the specific question posed to me, let me just set out the background as to where we've been last year, and regrettably point out to you that as per the announcement yesterday, we haven't moved very far. In October 2021, the Deputy Health Minister then said that the Home Ministry and the AGC have agreed to decriminalize suicide attempts. He told the Dewan Rakyat the Ministry and the AGC had agreed to abolish the Section 309 of the Penal Code, and the matter was to be brought before the Cabinet. Now, 1 year later, yesterday, YB Khairi, in his enthusiasm, informed us that finally the AGC has provided him with a report. That is to be discussed before the Cabinet. Now, quite worryingly, he had pointed out that there was some resistance from the KDN. Now, before I address the KDN issue, we have gone ahead 1 year while waiting for the paper to be brought to Cabinet. In that 1 year, one thing that has not been available or made available is statistics relating to suicides or attempted suicides for this year. This is why I say there is an urgency, because with every day that passes, there is a potential death that may occur. Now, addressing the issue of KDN, it is incumbent on MPs and cabinet members to address head-on the issues that they are going to face. Now, if KDN is indeed a stumbling block, then we must understand what the issues are. And I hope that KDN will be made to understand that more than 59 countries in this world have decriminalized suicide. I can understand the rationale behind equating public order with incarceration. If there were statistics to support that argument, if there were statistics to support the argument that it in fact was a deterrent, then that argument may stand. But as pointed out by the other panelists here today, there is absolutely no statistic that supports that argument. To the contrary, criminalizing an act of desperation would probably lead to an increase of such incidences. We are kicking an individual when he is already down. That is a last straw of the camel's back. So KDN is mistaken in their belief that there is deterrence to be gained from retaining Section 309. As also pointed out, the other thing is that with Section 309, those who are thinking about it will never step up and ask for help. We now know that many of those individuals come from those in the younger age groups. What is in store in the years to come? It is now that we need to address these mental health issues. PDRM, in fact, in a statement not long ago, have themselves recognized that the main cause for suicides and attempted suicide are actually social economic reasons. So if we are not going to address the root cause of the problem, incarceration is simply not going to be a deterrent. Policymakers need to adopt suicide prevention methods that are efficient. So more than the compassionate call that we've heard today, I urge members of parliament, members of the cabinet, to consider implementing policies that are effective. Policies that address the issues that plague our society. Putting someone in prison for an act of desperation does not cure the problem. What does? Treatment. What does? Addressing social issues. Again, I call upon policymakers to consider funding. Now, if that is an argument that is going to be raised against decriminalization, think about the funds that will be saved. When you divert away from the criminal justice system, from the investigative system, these individuals, divert them into healthcare, divert the resources, financial and otherwise, that are saved into healthcare. When it comes to police responding, there is no set protocol as to how police as first responders will respond to an attempted suicide incident. Upon being called to the incident, a police report will be lodged, and the AGC will decide whether or not to charge the individual. If she or he is charged, he or she will be charged at the magistrate court, where they will then decide whether they are going to plead guilty or choose to stand trial. At no point are the police required to obtain any mental health assessment before that stage. Even before the magistrate, it is entirely her discretion as to whether or not she decides to refer the individual for such an assessment. Even if it is done for the purposes of, number one, deciding whether this individual is fit to plead, or whether he or she suffers from an unsound mind. What happens after that is that he goes back into the criminal justice system, he goes back before the court if he is fit to stand trial, and he is tried. So it helps in no way. What should happen in an ideal world, in fact it's happening all around the world, in an ideal Malaysia, is that upon responding, they are immediately diverted to healthcare. We are very close, but we have been standing at the same place for more than 1 year. The issue now is urgency. I ask the relevant stakeholders to be transparent, provide statistics, most recent statistics about arrests, charges that have been instituted this year, while we have been waiting for the cabinet to decide, while we have been waiting for a decision even in relation to a moratorium. What has happened this year? How many have taken their lives while we have been waiting? One more thing I wish to raise is the fact of 4 million ringgit being allocated to a registry. We had heard about this, that this initiative came up many years ago, and then it was scrapped. It came back up not long ago. I think YB Khairi confirmed a few months ago that it was still, in answer to a question in Parliament, that it was still on board. And this system of reporting, this database is due to be ready in 2023, and it was reported that 4 million ringgit had been allocated to it. Now the question is this: who will report if they will go to, they are stand to be charged for an offense. Now, reporting is absolutely essential for us to monitor what is going on in our society. Now, we have to monitor so that we can respond with methods that are effective. For that reason, the system is necessary. But it will not work if nobody reports. And that has to be addressed immediately. So I urge everybody here, everybody listening, to now push for this as a matter of urgency. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Sangeet. In the field of medicine, there is this very well-known, tried and trusted concept of the golden hour. If you have chest pain, for example, and you seek treatment in 1 hour, that golden hour, the first hour, the outcomes are the best. If you have a head injury, for example, you seek treatment within that first hour, the golden hour, the outcomes are the best. So one wonders if somebody attempts to take his or her own life, what would be the benefit to this particular individual if he or she could gain access to prompt medical care in 1 hour? I think it will make a world of difference. And so that's another concept that I think we have to keep in mind, and not waste time by putting them through a criminal justice system which would only delay their access to medical care. I think we have heard the various arguments about why Section 309 is not effective, why it has to be repealed, and why it should be done as a matter of urgency, as pointed out by Ms. Sangeet. But we haven't heard the actual voices that actually cry for that help. And for that, I have with me Mr. Victor Tan, the Deputy Chair of Befrienders, which is one of the mental health organizations that have served Malaysians for many years, Malaysians in distress, and served them well. And to just give us an inkling of those troubled voices, I call upon Mr. Victor.
Thank you, Dato' Vino. That was very, I'm just very touched by the presentation by all the esteemed panelists so far. So I think what I want to do here is what Dato' Vino has asked me to do is just to share, give a perspective about people who are suffering from suicidal ideation in the Klang Valley. So Befrienders KL currently is one of the largest, if not the largest, helplines that service the Klang Valley. Okay, we run 24 hours, and we take approximately, we get approximately about 30,000 calls in a year. And for the past 3 years, people with mental health issues are the top category of callers to get in touch with us. So first of all, just want to point out that approximately out of the 30,000 people who get in touch with us annually, approximately anywhere between 35 to 40% of them express suicidal thoughts. Okay, so actually, just thinking about suicide is a very common thing, and only a very small percentage of people who think about suicide actually go on to make an attempt to end their lives. Otherwise, I mean, all the hospitals will be full of people. So actually, having suicidal thoughts is very common. I've had suicidal thoughts at a previous point in my life as well. And so probably would have some of you in the audience. So it's actually a very common thing. So this is already a very good reason why we need to repeal Section 309. I think my esteemed panelists here have already given a lot of reasons, but here's another reason, is that it prevents people to talk about suicide more openly. Okay, so that's one thing. Now I'm just going to give you a very brief kind of overview. I can't go too much into details because of the confidentiality policy that we have for our callers, but roughly people who are thinking very seriously about suicide or have actually made a suicide attempt, the kind of issues they struggle with, very commonly they have a mental illness. So it's typically depression, okay? Sometimes it's schizophrenia, okay? So it's a mood disorder, so with depression, anxiety disorder, or it would be a serious mental illness like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, delusions, and so on. So they're typically struggling in mental illness. They are not necessarily getting all the treatment they can get. So sometimes they want to get treatment, but they face opposition from your family members for a variety of issues, or they're getting treatment, but they're not following up with it. And then they have a pronounced lack of support from their family members. So there's isolation from their family members, from society. There's also a lot of trauma that they go through, emotional trauma resulting from relationship breakups, and then particularly during the pandemic period, loss of jobs, financial difficulties, and so on. So what we see here among our callers who are very highly suicidal or who have made suicide attempts is there is a combination of factors that come into play that push them to the point of seriously contemplating suicide or actually making a suicide attempt, right? So that's the first thing I want to kind of point out. The other thing I would like to encourage everybody to do, especially the YBs here, is to just look at the stats that is given in this paper that Dr. Chan, not Dr. Chan, but a whole bunch of folks, Johari, Dr. Ravi Rama, Dr. Norha Miza. Okay, so the paper here that you have in that press briefing, I think it's got a lot of very good stats. I just want to point out some of the stats here, and just also to time with what Dr. Salina talked about just now. So most of the people who attempted suicide were males, okay? And the main thing I want to point out is that about 70% of them had a mental illness, okay? So now we're talking about people who were actually caught, prosecuted, and were brought into a psychiatric unit for diagnosis and for follow-up, okay? This is a real follow-up case on all these people. So 73% of them actually had mental health illnesses, and approximately 100% of them, all of them, did not follow up on the prescribed mental health treatment. That means either medication, they were not compliant on their medication, or they were not following up with visits to their psychotherapists or counselors, okay? Literally all of them were non-compliant with treatment, okay? And so what we see here also is quite a number of them, more than half of them who had attempted suicide, they actually had an existing mental health disorder that they were not aware of, okay? So they were actually diagnosed with that mental illness at the point when they were brought into the hospital after their suicide attempt. Prior to that, they did not know they have a mental illness, neither did anyone else around them. And this is a very common theme that we see among our callers, is that a lot of people are calling to us and they will describe to us the standard symptoms that you would expect. Okay, I mean, if you're a mental health professional, I think Dr. Salina probably is aware of all these symptoms. They will describe all the symptoms of depression, anxiety disorder, or particular mental illness, and they'll say they're not getting any treatment, or if they will say that if they want to get treatment, they are facing opposition from their family members, friends, and so on, for a variety of reasons, which I can go on, but I'm not going to, for the sake of brevity here, right? So what we can see is that I think here, and on the issue that Dr. Salina talked about, is we really need to focus on Section 10, right? So Dr. Salina talked about Section 10, which is in the MMHA, and right now it's only just being used for people who are just wandering around the streets, just brought off the streets, right? I think really what we need is, looking at this report that was this very, very fantastic survey that came out, is that to replace, I mean, if there's an objection to repealing 309, like how do we help all these people? Like we are saying we want to help them, right? I think we really need to put focus on Section 10. I totally am in agreement with Dr. Salina there. Put focus on Section 10. The moment we find out that these people have attempted suicide, follow up on them. If they are not taking their medication, which in this report has shown that 100% of them were not taking their medication, they were non-compliant medication, they were not following up treatment, for a variety of reasons, we need to have proper follow-up. So that is the way. So if there's a question, right, what is the concrete way to handle the situation, saying that if we have now 309 repealed, how can we really effectively address, the problem here, suicide? Really is, I would say, Section 10. Make it compulsory for psychiatrists to follow up with these people. Now, like I said, for sake of brevity, there are a lot of reasons why they don't follow up with their medication. There's ignorance about how psychiatric medication works. There's ignorance about how counseling works. There is cultural and religious stigma, and also ignorance. So I've talked to a lot of people, like hundreds of people are suicidal. So there are a variety of reasons, okay? But all of that kind of needs to be addressed, okay? So I think that's probably about it. The only thing I will end is Dr. Salina, if you have a lot of doctors who are frustrated, I know you guys are frustrated, you can always call us and we'll give you some emotional support there as well. And thank you all so much to the esteemed panelists for supporting this really, really important issue that's very dear to our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. I'm glad you didn't mention how many times I have called befrienders.
It's all confidential, we won't mention, yeah.
So that brings us to the end of the formal set of presentations. I would like to point out two things that I think NCMW have got it right. And that is, I think over the last maybe 2.5 years since this task force was first formalized, we have had many meetings and discussions and all that. But this is the first time that we have been given the opportunity to speak one-on-one with the parliamentarians. And for that, I would like to congratulate Bindi, Siti, and the rest of the NCMW who have made this possible, because we do realize that the lawyers have a role, the doctors have the role, but finally, for that final push and where it matters, I think we need the parliamentarians. And again, this is a request for help, request to put all the right cards on the table and see where it will go. And so thank you, NCMW, for bringing the parliamentarians into the picture. And number two is, of course, there has been some discussion about doctors and psychiatrists and possible shortage and things like that. But for mental health, you really don't need doctors all the time. There are a lot of allied medical people, paramedical people, volunteers who can give the same amount of assistance to these people in need. And for that, again, I compliment the NCMW for training a lot of healthcare workers and volunteers into providing mental health assistance. I think the psychological first aid course and so many other courses that are being organized have actually proved its worth in gold, because where there are shortage of doctors, these people have been able to step in. Even simple things like when the floods happened a few months ago, Sri Muda, the floods. I mean, I think NCMW and their volunteers went out and helped in a very big way. And I think these little steps have gone a long way in helping these poor people in need. I would now, I think, as with the rest of the panel, be happy to take any questions or comments. And for a start, I would like to acknowledge in the audience the presence of Dato Dr. Andrew Mohan Raj, who has been a sterling figure in the provision of mental health services to the country. Any comments, Andrew? Dato? Yes. I think there's a mic there.
First of all, I think congratulations to the organizers as well as the panelists here to discuss this very important topic, and all the more because a statement on the current status of the process towards repealing the act was announced yesterday. So I think that has drawn a great deal of attention here, and I am particularly what should I say, overwhelmed by what Sangeet just now mentioned, that it's been for far too long we've been standing in the same place. So something has to happen, some movement has to be seen, and certainly Parliament would have a very significant role here, and therefore lawmakers really need to be engaged in this. At the same time, I was also, during lunch just now, I've heard about how the attempts to repeal 309 needs to perhaps also, and I might be a bit unpopular for saying this, but in the sense that we may, just in the back of our minds, also consider the possibility or the more realistic possibility of taking sort of baby steps before we are finally able to bring everyone on board. This is not my stand, this is not my preferred stand, obviously. I stand with all of you here on the same platform, on the same page. But somehow I feel while we are very enthusiastic to push this forward, I don't know whether we are overlooking also some real possibilities of navigating through this in a way that we would reach our ultimate goal, but may just take a little bit of time. These are thoughts that I entertain in the back of my mind, and I'm just sharing that with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Dado. I've never been fond of wet blankets, but thank you for showing us some caution in your comments. But yes, I agree. If certain things cannot be achieved immediately, baby steps are the way to go. And we will certainly look at all the permutations and combinations that are possible. We have the luxury of two esteemed YBs in the audience today. Allow me to ask both of you your comments. And Dato Kula, if I may ask your comments for Section 309 repeal.
Thank you, Dato. I'm not a Dato yet.
All right. My mulut manis, so you never know. You know.
Thank you for organizing this event. I think it was very interesting. I want to thank Dato Bindi for sending me so many messages reminding me of the event. I'm sure there are a lot of trouble taken. But from the panelists, I think we should zoom down to KDN. I would suggest that maybe you chaps should engage them directly, and then the law minister. Obviously, in the coming city of parliament, I for one and the others who are here will raise this matter in parliament, and hopefully something will come out of it. I've been in the opposition very long before, and then I was in government, and then I'm in opposition. Now I understand the process. Actually, it's the minister who must take the initiative. If the minister has the bill, it's just a day. I mean, I've done bills just within a week or two, you can get through. I mean, I've had so many discussions with Dato Rama on labor matters and all that. This can be done. And I think 309 by a stroke of pen, and it's something we will all agree, but somehow I think the minister may agree. I do not like to cast doubt on him, but I think he like many other ministers, will listen to the bureaucrats who have got their own sense of thinking and why it should not be decriminalized. I think 309 has to go, and he has to go as soon as possible. And as to whether it can be done away with this sitting, it's not that easy. Number one, I'm not too sure whether Parliament will be in existence in 10 days' time. So this session, I mean, it may be dissolved. If it doesn't, then the next 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the bills already arranged, and I think the earliest will be late November. There is enough time so to draft a bill. Dato Rama is very good in drafting bills, the lengthy ones. This is a very kachambute one. So there isn't, there are 2 sentences, isn't it? Just 2 sentences. I don't like it, repeal it. Thank you. I will definitely raise the matter and see. I'll come back to you all what can be done further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, YB, for those words of encouragement. And if I may ask YB Xavier Jayakumar's comments, please.
Thank you. Indeed, I think we're all on the same page as far as decriminalizing suicide is concerned. It's a crime having it there in the first place. The process is what you should understand. Like what Kula said, we were both in the cabinet at that time, and we were discussing about doing away with death
Death
penalty.
penalty.
And it was actually done except for one man who finally said that he does not agree. And so we couldn't bring it to Parliament. It was already for us to bring it to Parliament. So again, it's the minister in charge, memorandum to be tabled in cabinet, and then it will be forwarded to the Ministry of Law in order to get it. Let me just a simple example about AGC a bit. Anybody from AGC here?
No, unfortunately.
They take a damn long time to repeal the two-sentence bill. I'm telling you, I don't know what is the bureaucracy in it, and I and Kula have had tremendous problems with them. I mean, Sangeet is offered even her help in order to, when I was there as a minister, to do a new law that I was trying to do for tigers and things like that. And all meetings I always ask them, why is it taking you so long in order to get a bill back on the table? And there's no explanation for that, and they take long. Bills that came up during my time in 2018, 2019 was just passed this year, 2022. The bills that we had propagated. So it takes a bit of time. Now, since KDN is here, I think it is good to engage them. No? For me, I don't know why such a law is there in the first place. We have inherited the law from the British times and blame the British to hell as to what is happening all over the world at present. And I think this is something that we should make everyone understand and get over it as soon as possible. Whether we can table it in this parliament sitting, I am not very sure. I won't be very positive about it. But since Kyrie yesterday said something, we can take it up with him in Parliament. We will definitely consult with him and see where he stands. If the AGC's got a paper, then easy for it to come to Cabinet. The Cabinet has to approve it, and then it can be tabled as a first reading, and then continues as second reading, and then it can be repealed. Because it's a repeal only. It doesn't need two-third majority, right, Puna? It doesn't need a two-third majority. On a voice vote, we can repeal it in Parliament. And I think this is not a controversial bill, and that you'll get the support of the majority of the parliamentarians. And we do it during the evenings, and there's nobody in Parliament, so it will get passed anyway. So that's how it goes. So anyway, I would like to thank the panel and also Dr. Bindi for inviting us to come for it. And it's good that you have civil groups that talk about these things. Parliamentarians have got a lot of other things to do as well. And when these things come up, then we know how it is handled. I think since we have all shared power in this past 5 years, we completely understand how the civil service works. Before it was like shouting from the outside and not knowing what is the inside. But once you go inside, then you know how much ever you shout on the outside is not going to take much effect on the inside if you don't have the proper menu on the table in order to make sure that it is carried through and carried forward. So that is something that we have learned, and hopefully that it will go on from there as to how we can bring about the changes that we need. But I must say, in these 5 years, there's a lot of changes that's taken place, thanks to the MOU and things like that. We've seen laws that have been put in place that we will never think of, and now people are talking about other things that needs to be done as well. So this is one of it, and part and parcel of us getting out of this mess that we are in now. Thank you.
Thank you, YB. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Andrew.
Sorry, I don't want to deprive another person of asking a question, but this is something that I forgot to mention just now. While we all agree that 309 ought to go, no doubt about that, but I, as a not having legal background, often wondered why is it so difficult within the legal system to sort of give a indication or instruction or create an understanding among the presiding officers to look at the Mental Health Act 2001 and Regulations 2010, which actually has provisions for a person who had attempted suicide to be brought for examination and subsequently or to obtain a medical report, and to ensure that people do get treatment, as it was pointed out. Majority of cases actually have a diagnosable condition, and therefore they should be treated. So, if I remember correctly, the recent times, or maybe perhaps the first case of a person being charged under 309 was a case of a Somali student years ago, and prior to that we didn't hear of any, because I think all presiding officers generally knew, sort of like not to, and first of all they wasn't even charged, because in our own experience, Dr. Salina and I know that in the hospitals the police would just come and say, "Tapala, doctor, we just just make sure he gets the appropriate treatment," and they'll close they'll close one eye, because they also understood that. So somehow that Somali guy was made an example, and then from then on a few decided to use 309. So my question again is to all the legal experts here, if I were the number one person in the prosecution, would just tell all my officers, what, don't charge under this. Just look at Mental Health Act. And similarly in the judiciary, get all my presiding officers to say, use Mental Health Act, which has got enough provisions in there, and don't look at 309. Is that possible?
There are two different distinct issues. One is Section 10 and 11 of the Mental Health Act. It authorizes a person who is mentally disordered to get treatment. And that would include persons who have attempted suicide. That is as far as the Mental Health Act is concerned. That is for the treatment aspect of it. You also have the penal code that provides, or rather makes it a crime. So both of it would be there. Our position as far as NCMW is concerned, in our statement, what we have said, pending the repeal of Section 309, there be a moratorium. You do not charge anybody for attempting suicide. And we went further to say, during the period of moratorium, the state should use Section 10 and 11 of the Mental Health Act. So that is the position we have taken. So whilst the moratorium is in place, let's use Section 10 and 11 of the Mental Health Act, so that they are referred to the mental health experts, they would get the requisite treatment, and so on and so forth. And since there is a moratorium, there would be no criminal charges preferred. And I must, or I'll be remiss if I do not say what Doctor had stated, that to a large extent, the police do not prosecute, or rather the prosecution do not prosecute persons who have attempted suicide. That is a fact. I think Tuan is here, maybe he'll confirm afterwards, or otherwise, from what I know, my anecdotal observation in the courts is that to a large extent they do not. But they do prosecute at times. To a large extent, I know deputy public prosecutors would not sanction the paper to prosecute. They would just say no further action on these cases. But there are cases which are prosecuted. That leads to the other issue that we have to grapple with. Because it is an offense, therefore, mental health experts or hospitals or family members, as I said earlier, do not actually refer them for the requisite treatment that's required. If there is a moratorium in place, then that is overcome. Without the moratorium, the threat of a penal sanction is there. And also you have other issues, like, for example, impact on your insurance policies and so on and so forth. Those are areas that is also impacted. So that's the position we have taken. I'll just like to give you a small note. In India, they have taken the position of what you have said, Doctor. In India, they did not repeal Section 309, and they have yet to repeal it yet, unfortunately. But effectively, it has been decriminalized because they then amended their Mental Health Act to say any person who has attempted suicide becomes the responsibility of the state to provide treatment. So that this is a subsequent amendment to the penal code. So this takes primacy. But however, the act is there, so sometimes it's still some officials do not know that the Mental Health Act has primacy, still at times would charge a person or detain a person. So the best route obviously would be, as I think Doctor agrees, decriminalize, pending decriminalization moratorium and the usage of the Mental Health Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rama. Tuan, I have not had the pleasure of being introduced to you, but there has been some conversations about KDN, and since you're the only gentleman here in the uniform, would you like to comment, or if you are comfortable, you can just pass your thoughts on this.
Very good afternoon, and thank you to the chairman. I would like to thank Dato Windy for inviting. In fact, she was inviting my director, Dato Zaini, and my director cannot make it, so I have to represent my director. In fact, I have to disqualify myself. What I say is not an official stand from our part, especially on the Ministry of Internal Affairs or Royal Malaysia Police for that. I'm talking as a royal citizen, and this is my personal comment. I agree with Dato Sri Rama just now that we sometimes as investigators, we recognize those people who are crying for helps. And as it's already in the law, in our CPC, that attempting suicide is a crime, so our hands are tied, and there are process for us to follow. Once a report has been lodged, once a report has been officially lodged, that the only authority that can investigate the case is our AG chamber. So it needs to follow that process. And as our distinguished guest, Dato Rama, mentioned just now, most of the cases are being NFA based on that Section 10. Of course, definitely the investigation paper was open based on 309. But since it's very difficult for you to classify somebody who really need helps as a criminal, so at the end of the day, we will propose to the AG chambers under the Section 10 for them to be referred to the medical, or for them to be admitted to the hospital for the required treatment. So I think this is my personal view. And as investigator myself, I used to be an investigation officer, and I used to open IPs or investigation papers on attempting suicide. And that's our stand. As far as we're concerned, the decision should be made based on the decision. Otherwise, we are continually bound by the Section 309. And likewise, omission in law is an offense. So we as a royal citizen so need to follow what has been passed by the lawmakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those very honest comments, and we do appreciate the fact that on many occasions the police and other first responders do not actually go through the process of filing charges. Yeah, any online questions? Anybody monitoring any online questions? No, so far no, all right. Any questions from the media present here or any of the audience? If not, I think it gives me great pleasure to have had the privilege and the opportunity to chair today's session. I must say that this project came under NCMW about 2.5 years ago. We as a team have actually pursued it with quite a bit of commitment and dedication. I personally have been blessed by a tremendous team of all the panelists and other members of NCMW, and I had kind of thought that it would be good if we achieved something by the end of 2022. Now, with both the parliamentarians actually offering to bring this up, I think in the current parliamentary session, there is, of course, a small possibility that something will come out of it. And I do hope that something does come out, because personally, I'm not politically inclined, but Section 309 repeal plus an abolishment of the capital punishment would be a real feather in the cap for any government, something to be proud of. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I come to the end of this afternoon. Thank you very much for your attendance. I hope the menu today has been good enough, YB Xavier, to start the process of more menus in the Parliament. And have a good evening, and thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you to the members of the panel. I'll just wrap it up with a few words. You know, listening to the panel and from the floor, the general consensus is that we should be more inclusive in our approach to provide more support for survivors of attempted suicide, starting with the change in law. Now, it's imperative that this issue be dealt with urgently as lives are being affected, and this is the pulse of the grassroots. We are speaking for those who do not have the voice, and I hope those in power will heed what has transpired today. Now, we support the Ministry of Health's initiative in pushing this law forward, and we compliment it, and we fervently hope that this will be done sooner rather than later. The waiting is over. So I thank the members of the panel and members of the floor who have engaged in this conversation. Thank you so much for being here today. And the members of the press, thank you for your time for being here today. And let's keep this conversation going. Let's not let the fire die down. We need to see the change, and we need to see it soon. Thank you, and have a good day.